pleased to have Rick Harris here today. He's going to facilitate this Zoom session. Rick was on panel 1 discussion this afternoon. The recording for that was released a little while ago, if you haven't seen that. It was a really good discussion with some very open-hearted men around Peterborough about their own experiences. So, and Rick is joining us again. His experience as governor of Cambridgeshire, Peterborough and Fenland Trust will help us here this afternoon. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Rick and he'll take the lead for the rest of the session.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining the session today. This is a really kind of informal session. We're gonna have a chance to talk about mental health, but in particular about the places and the spaces that you feel are good for men's mental health. So that could be, places that you already know of and go to, maybe here in Peterborough or further afield. Or it could be places that you just love to exist, but don't at the moment. And if you could design one, here's your chance to give us some clues to what you think it would be good to have. So that's what I'd like to explore today. A little bit later on, we actually have an idea for a space that we're thinking about, and we'd love to get your thoughts on that. So I'll introduce that a little bit later on, but I'd like to hear from you first. So feel free to speak out on here on Zoom. So I noticed some of you are on mute and some of you are not. As long as there isn't too much feedback, I'm happy for people to stay off mute. But if we do get feedback, then by all means put yourself on mute. And if you want to say something, then obviously you'll need to unmute yourself. There's another way to join in as well, and that's the chat box. So there is a chat box down towards the bottom of your screen. Usually at the bottom, you'll see a little chat message area. And if you want to just type stuff into there, that's another way of giving us some feedback. And I noticed one person has just joined us, Heather. So you haven't missed anything, Heather. I just introducing the session and saying this is a great chance to have a discussion about places and spaces that we think are good for mental health. So unless there are any particular questions, and I'll try and answer questions as we go along, let's get started.
Rick, I've just got one question, a practical question. We've got the option to record this session. So first of all, I'd like to ask if anyone in this meeting is against having it recorded. And then also, I think you've got the host privileges, so you'll need to click the record button when we start, if that's what you think is right to do. So how do people feel about being recorded so that we can put the discussion online?
Fine.
Yes. Okay. Everybody happy?
No problem.
No problem at all.
Great, thank you. It says we are recording, Ian, so we're good to go. Okay, so let's start with what makes for a good space or a good place for sort of well-being. What can you are these places that are are they sort of what I might call focused spaces? I'm thinking of churches and galleries and quiet places, libraries, that sort of thing. Is it that sort of place, or is it sort of livelier places where people are a bit more noisy and spontaneous? What sort of places do you find are a good place for feeling good about yourself? Anyone has had any thoughts on that?
Did I mention the elephant in the room? Pubs.
Yeah, pubs, exactly. I mean, pubs fit into that livelier space for sure. So yeah, absolutely, that would be one possibility.
The only problem with pubs is there's always alcohol involved generally, and that alcohol and mental health and sort of well-being, I don't strongly associate with each other. I don't think alcohol in general as a habitual sort of practice helps you to optimize your mental health. So yeah, I just thought I'd I'd throw that out there. Even though they are great spaces for socializing, there's a little bit of a double-edged sword to them.
Right. Yeah.
And it might be quite a sexist view, but I think it's very easy for a man to walk into a pub. So I can understand what you're saying, that it would be a great place to meet. I would personally, you started off with churches, I would say probably not a church.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be a Samaritan, and we had a lot of conflict about being, everybody thought we were a religious organisation. And of course it's not, but there are connotations. So I think you need somewhere that's, just warm and welcoming, easily accessible to everyone. Right.
That's a great point, Leslie. So some places maybe bring a little bit of baggage with them that we see them for their primary purpose rather than perhaps what they could be used for or applied to do other things. Yeah, that's a good point.
I think maybe the point is that there is no one size fits all, because we're all very different as individuals, and where some people might find a more busy space is a more relaxing space for them. Other people might like the solitude and the calm of a church hall, and some people who have that faith would feel much more comfortable being in a house of faith, whereas other people might find that has negative connotations for them. So it's really about finding your space that suits you, just as finding your counsellor that suits you, or finding your group, your support group that suits you, is the key to it, really.
Yeah, that's interesting, Heather. So if I'm just thinking, if we had somewhere that perhaps could accommodate both a quieter place and a more convivial social space, would that be sort of help to provide options?
To me, I think options are important because individuals are looking for different things, and some people would feel it much easier to open up in quite an informal, relaxed environment like a pub, whereas other people prefer something a bit more structured and formal, and a bit more like a therapy session.
Yeah.
The other thing that's just occurring to me, we've got several people from Boxing Futures here. So a space, when I was first thinking about that question of the space, I was thinking about somewhere where we sit down and we stay still. But actually movements can be a way of communicating and opening up. So exercise and movement. So has anyone got anything sort of ideas around that, maybe from Boxing Futures or?
Sure, yes. I mean, I can see we're quite heavily represented here, and that's just a reflection of how important this subject is to us as an organisation, to be honest with you. I'd like to agree with the last person's comments, really. I think having a choice is, and a variety of choice is really quite important, because one size doesn't fit all. As a charity, we're peripatetic. We take our services out of the boxing gym and into the communities. Not to say that we don't use the boxing gym environment. Of course we do, because some people, like I said, enjoy that environment, and if they've never been involved in boxing before, being gently introduced into that arena through our charity is quite a nice way for them to really see what it's like. But generally, we're peripatetic. We take our stuff outside of the boxing room because we know it can be a slightly intimidating environment, and we truly believe that in the strength of the activity itself, the boxing activity, cardiovascular work, getting fit is a great benefit to positive mental health. So we want to make sure that everyone is accessible to the sport and our version of the sport, which is sort of non-contact.
Yeah, totally agree, Anthony.
I also, maybe our local community would be a good place to meet. My mother runs the Italian Community Centre in Peterborough. Has a huge amount of space. It also allows, if there wants to be some kind of incorporation of exercise, all there can be a creative section, so many options in local communities, and they're very private. There's so many different routes where we can talk about different subjects. Not everybody is comfortable talking about these kind of issues, so we can kind of break it down and kind of be creative with the place itself. Also, it's great refreshments at its own bar, and it's a fabulous place for anything to happen. So maybe that could be another option.
Thank you, Daniel. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm hearing a bit of feedback, and I'm imagining one or two others are too. So maybe this is a good time for us to go on mute, and then we can unmute ourselves as we. Yeah, that's better. I can hear no feedback now, so I think that works. So please don't feel that you can't say what you want to say. Just obviously remember to unmute when you jump in. Just picking up or joining together those last couple of things that talking about. So Anthony, you were talking about when you go out into the community. So what are the sorts of things that I guess you're looking for when you go to a space? Because it sounds like it could be lots of different places. Maybe I could put it the other way around and say, are there some things that you're avoiding?
Well, I mean, of course, with the current situation being an exception, we would normally, for example, I mean, I really like what Daniel had to say there, because we use various community centres across the city to deliver our programmes. So we want to make sure that, like I said, it's accessible to as many people as possible. So when in terms of space, it's just a big enough space depending on the group, really. We can work with small groups, large groups, and depending on the space size. So as long as it's just a space where we can sort of exercise, we can do a little bit of training. Like I said, it's not full-on boxing training, but it's very, very, very close to it. So you do need the space to do pad work and bag work, etc. But yeah, generally we use sports halls, community halls, leisure centres, even the conference rooms, anything of that nature, really. A lot of outdoor spaces that we get to use as well. Any bit of spare bit of grass, any bit of greenery, anything like that, really. So, and it's great because I mean, what our programs do again, is we encourage the conversation. So we know we're going to train together on box, but apart from the boxing, it's about the conversation and how we really start these people engaging in the conversation around mental health. And especially for the target area that we're working with, young people, it's very, very poignant sort of conversation with them. And we think that the earlier you get people talking about mental health and their own mental health, we think the better it is for society in general.
Yeah, it's interesting you threw in outside spaces as well there, which I guess at the moment, as you say, with some of the restrictions we have, outside spaces could become more important because there's a bit more flexibility with those. Leslie, were you about to say something there?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say that actually from everything that people have described so far, you need something where there's going to be a big space where there can be a group work or you can do your boxing, but also some breakout rooms so that if people want to go to smaller groups, because no disrespect, guys, but when guys are all together, it's kind of like, ooh, come on, we're all big men. But actually, if you take one or two to one side and actually ask them how they're really feeling, you're going to get that engagement. I think I love the fact, you say when you're doing your boxing, you're chatting as well. But for some people, they might just want a quiet space as well. So a mix of both. And again, I was the Samaritan yet again. I did befriending in the open, which there's a whole branch of Samaritans that just do festivals and things. And I could never believe how easy it was to start a conversation even in the middle of town and just say to somebody, how are you today? And actually for them to stand there and pour things out. So I think open spaces is brilliant as well, because it's not threatening being out in the open air as well. So a good mix. I think you're never going to find somewhere ideal unless you've got the money to build it from scratch. But
yeah. And you've introduced there, Leslie, maybe two different dynamics. We've talked about kind of more formal and informal spaces like churches and libraries and things, but the other thing you mentioned there was the more one-to-one discussions versus perhaps a larger group. And I'm again wondering whether that's, again, ideally something, a space that would accommodate both of those, so that there's that option for people.
I think that would be worthwhile, you know, just to give people, because mental health has such a stigma. So many people don't understand that everybody has mental health. It's just that some days it's good and some days it's bad. And there is that stigma. So if they were perhaps working with a smaller group, they might be more open, you know, and willing to talk.
No, I would certainly concur with that. I mean, even though we do sort of, when we're doing our boxing, the groups tend to be a little bit larger, but of course we have breakaway groups and have much smaller discussions within the groups, often bringing it back to a larger group discussion and picking out the points from all of the smaller groups in order to be able to feedback and to learn from. You know, we run a program called Brothers Through Boxing, actually, and it's about men's mental health, and it's about social isolation, and it's about preventing male suicide. This is funded by the Movember Foundation, who are a world men's health charity. So we've actually gone into this with some degree of thought and consideration, where we just actually co-designed our program with some of the young people that we already work with, and then we tested the model, and still in the process of updating that model. Again, this has been freely available to young people under the age of 25 within the city. But yeah, I think it's, again, just to agree with you, you need to have, often, you know, you get a lot of bravado with a lot of young guys, and sometimes, you know, when they're all together in a group, some of that alpha male testosterone stuff does come to the surface. But very quickly, you know, when you do go into the smaller groups and you start this sort of conversation, you can really see some of the issues that these guys face, and they're actually quite open up and quite willing to share quite openly, which I found it's been quite liberating, actually working with some of the young guys around this issue. And again, a lot of them will tell you that a lot of their issues stem from when they was in school, secondary school mainly, very few from primary school, but mainly a lot of this stuff develops through their puberty ages, and when they're going through different changes, you know, discovering themselves around sexuality, and also just, you know, masculinity. I think you can't really have this conversation around men's mental health without talking about masculinity and what it means to them, to people individually, and how society views masculinity, and I suppose some of the old-fashioned views about masculinity and what that should be. And I think in today's world and society, that has shifted considerably, and it's worth sort of considering when we're having these conversations.
I think, Anthony, just by being around people like you guys, involved in an area of boxing which, you know, stereotypically would be some amount of sort of quite a masculine area, where you would perceive that people would have a big ego and they would hide their emotions, but just be around people that are in that area that aren't like that, just that osmosis of that behavior must be priceless, I think, for those young influential minds. So even if you're not having explicit conversations about mental health, just that exposure to sort of open-minded males that aren't afraid to be open about their emotions, that's such a positive thing.
That's so important, Neil. I'm really glad that you mentioned it, because it is a very masculine environment. Not to say that we don't have, in fact, we've got a sisters through boxing program, but that's another agenda. But you're right. I mean, my head coach, Cello, who's sitting there with his t-shirt on, he'll be able to tell you for himself that when we deliver this program, you have to give something of yourself, or otherwise you're not going to get anything out of these young lads. You know, you have to give of yourself. You have to share some of your own experiences. Of course, you have to make sure that it's relevant and appropriate, and et cetera, et cetera. But you know, Cello will tell himself, you know, about opening them up to some of these young lads and the rewards that brings.
Yeah, amazing. Mm.
Yeah, I think also I just want to express this. I think we really underestimate how important and how such a boost it is just to speak to one person. So just on my experience a few days ago, I've got a guy, I've known him 35 years plus, going through a real difficult stage, and just by him opening up to me as a one-to-one, we both felt incredibly jubilated after the conversation, and it made us feel very good about both ourselves. So I think that's super important. Just that even a one-on-one with someone is huge. And also going back to the mixed group, I think the mixed group is super important too, because I find it very difficult to speak to a woman about how I'm feeling. And I think that is so, so important, because obviously I'm married, I have a wife, I have a family, and sometimes I can't find it in me to talk to the opposite sex about how I'm feeling. So I think that them two things, for me, they're huge. I don't know how anyone else feels about that, or if anyone's had any experience about opening up to the opposite sex.
I work for a counselling charity, and we have about 40 different counsellors across Cambridgeshire. And as well as one-to-one counselling, we provide sort of workshops and training in mental health. And it's interesting that you say that, Daniel, because we get some men who specifically request a male counsellor, but we also get other men who specifically request a female counsellor because they would find it difficult to open up to another man, whereas they feel their experience of women is they are more used to talking about their feelings, and therefore they feel more comfortable in opening up to a female. So it's really important that we acknowledge that there are people in both camps. There are people that want to do men's stuff with men, but when it comes to talking about feelings, they're more comfortable with a woman. And then there are men who feel more comfortable talking to other men because they feel they have more empathy for their position.
Yeah, we talked. That's helpful, Heather. And again, we keep coming back to this no one size fits all, and having options. We're creating quite a matrix, I think, with all these different options. One thing I was going to just ask, where I saw the conversation going, is how important is it to build a group or a place where it's familiar? Well, that could be the people are familiar, or it could be the surroundings are familiar. Because Anthony, you're saying, go out and about into the community. That could be different places. But is it a little community you're building, or is that easier for groups and men to talk than if actually they're meeting each time they go there, there's people they've never seen before, and maybe harder to open up? What's people's experiences of that?
I mean, from our experience, because we run specific groups, that specific group sort of get to know each other and they form relationships. And part of the group is about forming those bonds, building those social connections up that are positive. It's a 6-month program, so it's not a quick fix for us. We actually, really take our time to consider the subject matter that we're talking about. So we go into things like relationships, and also about the body image and the self-esteem and all these other issues which are interconnected into the for the whole person. So in terms of the spaces that we use, I mean, we find that groups that know each other, sort of get to know each other, can sort of readily start opening up. And that's why we sort of do it in group work. And that group sort of graduate together and come back out as an alumni. And in fact, they then join the sister group, who, when they graduate, they both join the same alumni and carry on working on these issues and some of the issues together as a group, rather than in silos. So we recognise that there are differences, between young men and young women, and some of the issues sort of they face, but also a commonality. So and also when it comes to the course facilitators, we just don't have men on the Brothers Through Boxing program. We just don't have females on the female full boxing program either. It's very important for people to recognise that are positive role models on both sides that have value and have value in our lives. As, for example, as men, of course, women have huge amounts of value in our lives. So to exclude them it would be absolutely wrong in our opinion. So during the course of our program, we very much promote that way of thinking.
Okay, let me, I mentioned earlier at the beginning, I'd like to sort of throw in an idea that I know Ian has been exploring with a potential sort of partner in the Peterborough, in the city. I don't know if anyone's heard of the Alia Future Business Centre. So it's located just next to the football ground, Peterborough football ground. And at one level, that is it's a business centre. Lots of businesses work from there and hold events there and so on. But it's also quite a sort of flexible space. And we've talked a bit about, listened to you all talk about the need for sort of options for quiet spaces, more convivial sort of social spaces. And actually that place, what's being considered is to maybe offer that as a sort of hub for guys to meet. And it does have quite a range of meeting spaces. There is quite a large cafe area with seating and so on, a very open plan sort of lounge, comfy chairs, but there's also some private meeting rooms as well. And the guy who runs it is actually quite sort of open to sort of making that available as a place for guys to come and meet. And I'm just curious what your thoughts on that might be. It's quite a neutral environment. I think it was Leslie said at the beginning that a church brings connotations first and foremost of why this place was built. A business centre is a bit more neutral because it is used for lots of events, and it's designed to be flexible so that you can make it feel like today it's doing this job and tomorrow it might be doing something else. So on the face of it, it felt like quite a useful venue that might have some potential. But I'm interested in, based on what we talked about in the last half an hour or so, I'm interested in whether people feel that might be a good something to explore. What are people's first impressions of that as an idea?
I've been to meetings there before. I went to a networking event there.
Okay.
It's a great space, and I think the other thing is it is used for so many different things. You know, some people would feel reticent maybe saying I'm going to a mental health meeting, but actually if they just went, I'm going to a meeting at the Alia Centre, there's so much that goes on. It covers such a wide spread. Being near the football ground at the moment, that's a really good pull as well, because most people know where the football ground is. So it's convenient, it's easy to get to, and it is a great space. And they do really good coffee as well. I don't know about the beer or anything.
Yeah, I don't think they do beer. I'm not aware of that. And also, as you say, it's easy to get to, and you can park there quite easily as well, which I know is important. Not always the case for everywhere in the city. Any other thoughts on that idea as one of the things I was thinking about is, you know, if I was going to go to somewhere like that, am I expecting there to be sort of structured activities, things like people I can talk to get help, to ask questions about formal help, or is it more an informal group where we're helping each other and it's who I meet there on the day? I'm just wondering whether that, you know, is that a blend of those two things?
Can I just jump in? We're currently based at Alia. That's where our office is. So we're always available. If it was you, somewhere where our staff, our team, Cello, who's sitting beside me, we've got our staff there. And then obviously, if the men use it as a hub to do their meetings, due to mental health or that drop in, they can also speak to us about accessing any kind of gym stuff or other support networks that they may benefit. With also Cello's always there. He's always flying around as their coach. Our other staff there as well, Sarah. And so we may be able to offer something different when they drop in, if we know when the days would be. It's something that we could work alongside, which I think would be very good, because if sometimes you get a better reaction, or better, you can get the topic spoke about when it's not planned. If it's just like a chance meeting and you sit and talk to someone and then discuss, because you never know what people are, where they are, how they're feeling that day, and if they know that there is different support around, they know that that's safe, and probably gives them that, it gives them that reason to come up there a little bit more. And now we're always here, and we're always open to talk to people, always. definitely. Like, I'm used to That's it. Yeah, like I say, like, we've been at Alia Park now for like well over a year now. It's a real nice place. It's got rooms where you can have one-to-ones, rooms where you can have group settings, group sessions. Sometimes you don't know who you sit next to. You know, you can sort of like speak to them, ask them how their day's been, what they've been up to, what are you doing, and before you know, you built up a friendship, built a relationship with the person you sat next to, and this is great to be working obviously in the Alia Park, and you know it's great. It feels like home.
That's really good to hear. So do you do the exercise sessions, the physical sessions there as well, or is it your other programs?
We have more like our meetings here. We get together. Our staff will get together. We see each other. We have our group chats. We check out our week plan, what we're going to be doing, how we're going to go about it all, and have our meetings here. I'll say like one-to-one meetings, group sessions, and then we plan our week ahead. And it's a safe place to do so.
Great. The other thing I'm just thinking here is that when Paul from the Future Business Centre first mentioned this, he planned it to be kind of in collaboration with Peterborough United Foundation. So that's for those who don't know, that's the charitable arm of Posh Club, and their remit is to help people in the community through sport and exercise, but just to help the community in general. So he and that came about after one of their groundsmen committed suicide. That idea for the collaboration. Now, unfortunately, since lockdown, the guy from Peterborough United Foundation has left the organisation. But I'm just wondering whether that's something that could be, because that gives access maybe to the grounds or some outdoor space, or some variety of activities that could happen. I don't know.
I don't know if this is useful, but I think the Alias space is a great space. I've been there many times, and it's very flexible. Being located by the football ground is also good. I think the actual space is less important than how you pitch what's going on. Like I said, we run a lot of mental health awareness sessions within workplaces for corporates to educate their staff about mental health. And we get mostly women turning up because of this perceived stigma about men talking about mental health. So we've since put together a men's mental health session. And what we have to do in order to get them through the door is kind of make it about mental health by stealth. So you invite them in on a men's health session, and you include things like a cholesterol check and a blood pressure check and some information about sport and how important sport is in keeping physically fit. And then you sort of morph that session into talking about mental health, and suddenly people turn up sort of thinking they're going to get one thing, and before they know it, they've bonded with a group of people. You've done maybe a few boxing activities or some squats or circuits together, and suddenly you're sitting down in a circle talking about how you feel when you didn't really expect to do that. And we found that to be much more successful. So I think what you at Boxing Futures is doing is great, because that's absolutely how you get people in. You get a group of people doing something else. They build trust, they build a community, they find a couple of people they gel with, and then they take them off into a corner and have a bit more of an in-depth chat.
Heather, could I just ask you a quick question?
Yes.
So these groups that you do, would you say that people that attend them, there's quite a few people that are surprised who they know when they're there?
Well, we work in workplaces. We've only ever done it in a workplace so far. So the people that turn up, they're all work colleagues. And what you were saying before, Anthony, about building that bond and building that sense of community, we find they always work better if you have people that have some communality. So if you get people who are fulfilling a similar role or they're a similar level of person, if you've got the MD sitting in the same room as a guy who does the cleaning, they are not going to sit and open up about their mental health unless you find some other means of common ground. So that's when, you know, getting the squats and the tests and what have you works, because then they realise they do have a lot in common. But where I think it's important that the group is able to gel and bond before you expect them to open up. You can't get people in a group of people and just suddenly expect them to open up. Maybe teenagers who've grown up with the idea that it's okay to talk about mental health a bit more. But I'm also a member of a drama group. So again, we have quite a few young guys who are attracted to musical theatre. And you get them in on the premise of doing a bit of singing, dancing and acting. But what you find is then you get little subgroups forming who take themselves off to the pub and chat about maybe their sexuality or whatever's going on in their life. And they end up being a support group. So it's less about forming a group, which is a long-term process, and more about taking an existing group that already have that communality and by stealth introducing the idea of mental health to them.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit difficult for us because obviously I'm self-employed, so every day I'm out and I'm up and about and I'm by myself all day long. So obviously to try and bring somebody you know or talk about it to someone you know who you'd like to bring with you is very, very difficult. So how would you kind of go about, you know, maybe bringing someone or opening up to them about the group? Would it work?
I think yeah. I mean, if it's not a work communality, then looking at it with an existing group of people who share the same hobby is a really good way to get people involved.
One thing we've just touched on, well, we've touched on it all the way through to a degree, but I just hearing you talk about young people, and it's making me think, well, do these places, do they have natural age groups? In other words, if we were, you know, trying to get people to come along and feel comfortable at the Alia Centre, would it make any difference if some of the people there were young guys and other people there were well into retirement? I mean, would that be, or could we then talking about another set of options where there's some sort of, maybe some days it's for a certain generation, or is that too artificial? What do people think of that?
Again, I'm really sorry to dominate the conversation. It's just that we sort of lived and breathed this, working with sort of young males in this way for the last couple of years through our partnership, like I said, with the November Foundation. And of course, they look a lot into these sort of things, which is why, again, I agree with everything that Heather just said, but also I think the variety, there needs to be a lot of choices, a lot of different ways for men to be able to engage. So everybody's got to like boxing, some might like football, some might like gardening, some might like cooking. And one of the advantages of working with the November Foundation and how we actually got awarded the grant to develop our program was that there's actually 12 successful programs around the world from Australia, Canada, America and the UK, which actually received the funding to develop these projects. And some of the other projects that were developed, for example, was a men's pie club, where men come together, they cook pies and they just chat. What a fantastic project, what a fantastic idea, and it works wonderfully well. In fact, we invited them down to Peterborough from Manchester to have a men's pie club with our group instead of boxing one session, because we found, and what a special session that was for us, because again, you know, guys are just opening up over pastry, you know, I'm cooking a turkey and cranberry pie, I think it was. It was just the most amazing thing. But I can imagine the same thing happening around gardening clubs and around men's sheds, where people are just tinkering with electronics or engineering bits and pieces. But what I think is probably needed, and I think there's probably, you know, groups in Peterborough that we're all unaware of. If there was an umbrella group, you know, for organisations that are working in men's mental health or mental injury, so that actually, you know, there's a group that's into football, you know, there's a group that may be into gardening, or you know, there's a group that's into engineering or darts or whatever it is, and you know that they're going to be there to really to support each other, to support men and support men's mental health. And I think a smorgasbord of options for people really is the key. Is the key here, because look, as much as I love what we do, and I think it's fantastic, and everybody should do it, boxing is not for everybody, and I appreciate that, and that's why I think there's value in making sure that there is a wide range of different activities. I can imagine fishing being another sort of sport or pastime for some men that would really value and could really work. So no, I think it's
I would agree with that, and I don't think in terms of long-term sustainability, people coming to meet to sit around and talk about mental health, I think that you might get a good gathering once or twice, but I think ultimately maybe this should be about injecting them into different networks that are attractive to them, so that maybe the whole purpose of this is about that, creating that hub of knowledge in which to then catapult people into newer areas of interest, like all of those ones that Anthony mentioned, and all of the different things that are happening in Peterborough. Green backyard, if you're into that type of thing. There's music, there's ukulele orchestras. These are things people don't even know about. And maybe the modus operandi of this group should be about, exposing them to that and just letting them know about it, and letting them know they've access to it, and giving them that push to kind of go that direction that they might feel a little bit gravitating towards.
I really love what you said, Niall. What everyone has said today. So this idea of kind of an umbrella where people are just given options. So we've kind of established that one size doesn't fit all, and that there's almost limitless number of ways that people can be made to, or be encouraged to feel safe to open up, from pie clubs to boxing to unfortunately a guy called Sean Easton, I don't know if any of you know him, who runs car clubs. So it's like a car maintenance and repair as a means to talk about and open up about the men's mental health. So there are some groups already that exist that don't have an underlying mental health as a kind of underlying topic or agenda for people to talk about. So is there, I guess what I'm saying is that there's loads of potential activities, but in these groups, do we need to have someone who's skilled or there as a kind of support, or could we just sort of open up the option for people to do any activity?
I mean, I think, again, it just depends on how you want this group or hub to sort of look like. I mean, you could have a hub, for example, where actually they come and actually access all this information that we've just been talking about, access to different groups and have that information, and maybe have that run by somebody who, maybe there's somebody there that's sort of qualified to be able to signpost people on to support wherever, if they needed more sort of serious or sort of more sort of hands-on based support, more immediate support, should I say. And I think that would have a lot of value, because that way, people could feel safe just to pop in, maybe have a look around at what the information is there, have someone to sit there and have a little chat and a cup of tea to, but also if they had a bit more profound issues, that they could be signposted up to the appropriate places.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would imagine a lot of men just probably want to know what's out there. Oh yeah, there's a football club over there. And if you call it a well-being hub rather than maybe focusing on the word mental health, I know there's a lot of sort of discussion throughout the day around the word mental health and the stigma attached to it and stuff, but I think a lot more people are sort of more comfortable with the terminology well-being, I would imagine, and having a well-being hub where people, I think it's so far more welcoming, and I think it's just it just makes access to mental health support services more accessible by using that sort of terminology.
Well, nice to hear you confirming that. I know Mind offer, they run some good mood cafes. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. So that's a similar idea, that it's focusing on good mood and not necessarily mention the word mental at all. So
sorry, Ian. I used to run a men's group in community when I was in substance misuse field working, and we found having a men's group that was not peer-led, but you let them take the lead about the sessions of what they wanted to talk about, what they wanted to discuss, anything. But it was a very informal setting for like 2 hours a week. We just sat in the room, we met for coffee and just chatted about whatever issues they wanted to speak about at that time. And then if they wanted to signpost or move on to another support group or something else that they thought, then that was something that was discussed and arranged.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Maybe there are two different activities that need to happen, really. And I think you just hit the nail on the head. Sorry, I don't know your name, Mr. Box. Andy. Because you almost need that space, maybe at the Alia Centre or wherever, which is the place you signpost to, and that's facilitated by a professional who knows what they're doing, with people who need just a little bit more than a listening ear. But in the first instance, what people just need is a listening ear, somebody just that they can let off steam to and talk to. And then if that person has some understanding of some of the more common mental health problems and how they manifest themselves, they can start to recognize when somebody needs something a bit more than that and signpost on to another group. So you're almost going out into the community to all these hobby groups, if you like, to train people and spread the word about what mental health is, and not using the words mental health. You've hit the nail on the head, Anthony. Even well-being now, people start to know what that is, talk, double speak for. So even just calling it, chat session or drop-in session or whatever, is better than mental health or well-being. But you start to educate people about those issues, and then you give them a space to signpost on to, and that's where your support group comes in. And then ultimately counselling, should anyone need, be serious enough for that.
I think Heather's made a really good point, and Andy too. You have all these clubs. It's very easy to go in and say, I'd like to join a gardening club, or I'd like to. It's so much easier than saying, I'm really struggling with my mental health. And sometimes there's that, you've got to find a way in, to find somewhere that you're comfortable, where you think you'll be accepted for whoever you are. And then you'll be able to find the courage to speak, to be more open about how you feel.
Yeah, I'm seeing some sort of hybrid of sort of a network to what's going on in the community, and some sort of not using mental health support, but as sort of a, not hidden, but as a byproduct, as sort of a support network for people as well. So somehow, branding experts could come up with things that's so important these days, isn't it? But if you call it chat session, people aren't really going to understand that. It sort of needs to have some level of branding consideration, doesn't it, to appeal to people.
There is a slogan, It's good to talk. But that one's really sort of hackneyed now. But it is just getting people to feel comfortable enough to open up. So
yeah, that's really, I absolutely see that positioning is key. And interesting that Heather was saying that you can perhaps position it one way to recruit people, and then the activities can stretch them and develop them once they're there. And I don't see anything too surreptitious about that. I think that makes a lot of sense. Ian, I'm conscious of time. We've run a few minutes over. Any final words you want to add in at this point?
Just a big thank you, really, for everyone for sharing their knowledge and expertise. We've got some really experienced people here. So this information is going to be fed back to the Future Business Centre, to Paul Smith, and I'm sure will be really useful guide for him when he's positioning what his offer, really. So I think it seems like there's so many ways to do this, but I like what Niall just said about hybrid. So we need to change the way we describe support for mental health so that it isn't off-putting and it is attractive. But then also, once we've found people who want to open up and talk have other options for them. So one of the things I'm taking away from the discussions I've had leading up to this event as well is that there is a lot of support around, and there are lots of options. So even just the conversations that help more people know that there's all these clubs that exist out there will spread the word, and when people in the public come across someone who's struggling, they can suggest Boxing Futures or a car club or this hub in the Future Business Centre. So it's all about spreading the word, really. And maybe there's the scope to do that online, to create some online umbrella. But really, thank you all so much. This Zoom call kind of was supposed to be the last session of the day. We haven't released the other talks because of the technical problems, but I really hope we can all stay in touch. And if you've got any thoughts or feedback after this session, then please do email me or contact me in whichever way is easiest for you, and I'll really be pleased to hear from you. So thank you very much, and I'm sure I'll see some of you, if not all of you, again in the future. Cheers.
See you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Bye.
See you, everyone.
Right, thank you guys.
So bye.